Hello, friends and neutrals. I am Alex Spike Apples Jacobson, and I got a little comment directed at famous Chinese businessman Mr. Jack Ma. I am not deterred by the fact that I am, as of yet, not quite on the same standing with Mr. Ma in terms of either renown or wealth. That can be corrected virtually anytime, and I consider myself a person fully entitled, if nothing else, to make such comments intellectually. Mr. Jack Ma recently met with American newly elected President Donald J. Trump, newly sworn in, and reportedly kind of mentored and lectured him a little bit on how he should run America's affairs. Of course, Donald J. Trump is a famous businessman himself, and probably Jack Ma figured that since doing business has been proclaimed as the main goal by this new American leader, then maybe he can find a way to his heart and mind. Mr. Jack Ma reportedly said that America has wasted roughly quarter century after the end of Cold War on wars instead of infrastructure and education. I'd like to remind Mr. Jack Ma that there are many famous universities in the United States, such as Yale, Harvard, MIT, UCLA, Fordham, Columbia, New York University, Xavier, Notre Dame, you name it. I don't know a single Chinese university of a similar standing in world's eyes. America is a home to many great infrastructure-related companies, whether building, construction, whether car makers, airplane makers, and so on. I don't know a single Chinese company that would be of equal standing to Boeing or Ford. Mr. Jack Ma may be a famous and very, very rich man. By the way, I wonder why his company, the online retail giant Alibaba, was named after a Middle Eastern character. I do not have anything against Alibaba. I like that character very much. Seen and grew up seeing many films and cartoons about him. But I thought China has its own extremely rich and vast folklore, and you could pull up quite a few equally worthy Chinese tale characters to find at least one to name your company after. That is not very patriotic, and I thought Chinese people of today are supposed to be patriotic, Mr. Ma. But Mr. Ma, you made your millions working in a system which, while having been for almost 40 years somewhat reformed towards fairer and freer one, still is based on one-party government's approval and sycophancy. Mr. Ma, who are you to lecture elected leader of United States and essentially of the world? Mr. Ma, you want America to not lead wars. Apparently you think that stopping a communist takeover of Grenada, kicking out dope peddling general from Panama, stopping carnage in former Yugoslavia or in Libya, retorting for vicious, indescribable evil attack on United States carried out from Afghanistan, or for that matter, first kicking out another vicious dictator, Saddam Hussein, out of a neighboring country that he attempted to take over, and then deposing him from his own country that he tortured for roughly 30 years. All those things are not worthy spending any resources of them. I happen to disagree, even about the Iraqi war. But Mr. Ma, what about your own country? You lecture United States to mind its own business and not lead wars, but instead make roads and schools, while your country is committing illegal military buildups, while your country is muzzling its neighbors, and while inside your country there is still internet censorship, oppression of religious minorities from Tibetan Buddhists and Falun Gong, the movement that was started by the communist government in order to distract people from political activity to both ethnic Chinese and Uyghur Muslims, and especially Christians. And I hope, actually, that in his dealings with the Chinese leadership, our new president is going to use that fact as an additional argument, because Chinese Christians are put in a situation where they're pressurized to shut down their independent assemblies, to only attend and be members of the officially approved churches, and so on. And there is up to 100 million Christians today in China, roughly 7 to 10% of its population. Mr. Jack Ma, your own country still, for all its advances, yes, I've heard news, seen news about the first ever direct train from, if I'm not mistaken, Beijing to London. But isn't it true that your country's rural areas are still quite backward, especially in minority regions such as Uyghur or Tibet regions, autonomous provinces? Mr. Ma, isn't it a fact that some of your country's most important cities are living in a state of essential ecological uh, apocalypse? We see all the time people in Beijing, your capital, which is probably not even the most industrially loaded city of your nation, walk around in the daylight in gas masks. You gonna lecture an American president after all that? Mr. Jack Ma, I think it's you and your Communist Party bosses in Beijing that ought to turn inward of their country. Mr. Jack Ma, I sincerely hope that somehow, one way or another, you happen upon this video and give a good listen to it. Because Mr. Jack Ma, your advice to American president was uncalled for and useless. Thank you very much.